They thought we'd kneel. The sky split open on a rainy Tuesday. Mourning like something biblical, except the gods that came through weren't. Offering salvation, they hovered above every capital, every stronghold, every piece of earth that ever mattered, ships, shaped like obsidian daggers, humming with power we couldn't even name. They didn't land, they broadcast. A voice cold and detached filled every speaker, every screen, every device, wired to a signal. You are no longer sovereign, you are a resource. Submit and your extinction will be delayed. No explanation, no negotiation. Just a galactic boot stomping down on the neck of an already fractured world. Most governments folded in hours. The ones that tried to resist, India, Brazil, parts of what used to be the U.S., were vaporized. One strike per city, no warning, just heat and ash and silence. And that was that, or so the Greys thought. They didn't understand us. See, humans don't take well to being told we're livestock. Doesn't matter how scared we are, doesn't matter how much we bleed, there's something hard-coded into us, some virus of defiance that doesn't compute in a species like theirs. They function on control, on order, on submission. We function on rage. My name's Ren Maddox. I was a systems engineer for a mining rig out in Alaska. Before the sky cracked open, I was just another guy keeping reactors stable and staying drunk enough not to care about the world burning around me. But the invasion, that shook something loose. When my brother died in the Santiago burn, just a flash on a grainy satellite feed, it stopped being about survival. It became personal. They took everything, but they forgot one thing. We build better when we're pissed off. The resistance didn't start with armies. It started with code, with whispers, with hacked drones and weaponized AI, fragments salvaged from Profal labs. We were scattered, hungry, half-mad, but we were still human, and when we're cornered, we evolve. The first strike was in Moscow. A group of ex-special forces and rogue coders hijacked a terraforming station the Greys had set up. We overloaded its core and turned the atmosphere weapon on their own processing units. 3 of their spires melted into slag. That's when they noticed us. That's when the real war started. But it wasn't like the movies. No dog fights in the skies, no heroes in capes. Just blood, silence, and sabotage. They called us Terran scourge in their transmissions, said we were primitives, unfit for the galactic collective. Yet they feared us because, unlike them, we didn't fight to preserve, we fought because we had nothing left to lose. I ran Cell 47 out of the Rockies. We weren't soldiers, we were scavengers. Hackers, broken people who got real good at killing things not built to die. We'd hijack their supply routes, reverse engineer their tech, and feed coordinates to other cells, underground, in the snow, in the jungles, wherever a signal could reach. We didn't have central command. We didn't need one. We had fury. The Greys made one fatal mistake. They thought control was strength, but control breeds fragility. And humans were chaos. We're war. We're pain, ambition, and madness. Wrapped in flesh, they brought a war machine. We became a virus, and on the eve of their celebration, when they thought Earth was pacified, we cracked the encryption on one of their orbital dreadnoughts. It took us years, blood, sacrifice, friends lost in dead zones. But we got in. We called it the Rise Protocol, and when it launched, it didn't just strike back, it sent a message across the stars. Terran power is rising, and we are not. Your subjects, we are your reckoning. They didn't know what we looked like. Not really. Sure, the Greys had our DNA. Mapped, our atmospheric ranges studied. Our blood types cataloged, but that was surface level clinical. They didn't understand what makes us tick. What makes a species burn its own cities just to spite a conqueror, they thought. Humans broke easily, but what they mistook for weakness was something else. Entirely adaptation. We weren't raised in order, we were born in chaos, in war zones, in poverty, in fractured homes and forgotten towns. That's what makes us dangerous. That's what makes us impossible to control. I wasn't a hero. None of us were. We were broken men with nothing left to lose. That's who wins wars, those who already died on the inside and kept going. Anyway, the Rockies had become one of the few places left where we could still breathe without surveillance pulses, tracking our heartbeats. Thick stone ridges and erratic weather patterns jammed most alien sensors. The old NORAD bunkers, long abandoned now, ran hotter than they had in decades. No flags, no countries, just survivors. Our unit, Cell 47, was led by me, but not because I was the strongest. I was the one who got an NBSP done. That counted more than rank or muscle. There were 6 of us left after the last raid. Thorn, ex-coalition sniper, half his face burned from a plasma burst. Barely spoke, but he could put a charge round through a grayskin's optic at 600 m. Like it was a carnival game. Nico, a Cuban engineer who used to rig power grids for collapsing governments, now he designed EMP traps and chemical pulses that scrambled alien drones like flies in a microwave. Grant, youngest of us, just 18, his dad was vaporized in the first strike. He didn't say much either, but he fought like he was already dead. Always first into the breach. Mira, ex-medic, used to work in UN conflict zones. After the fall, she stopped patching wounds and started designing viruses that target grayskin biology. Cold, efficient, sharp as hell, and DOS, big, quiet guy who never explained where he came from. Good with explosives, better with fear. You put him near a grayskin patrol and waited for the boom. That was our crew. Misfits, broken pieces of a shattered world, but together we hit harder than any army the old governments could have mustered. We were tracking a convoy that day. 3 alien haulers escorted by 2 air support drones headed to one of their processing zones in old Denver, where humans went in alive and came out as compost or data streams. No one really knew. No one came back to explain it. We set up in a dead town called Arvada. Used to be a suburb. Now it was ash and metal, husks of cars fused to the pavement, trees blackened like they'd been flash fried. A perfect graveyard to ambush gods who thought they'd won. I crouched behind a rusted out SUV, watching the sky pulse with faint violet streaks. Their drones. Mira tapped into their comms using a spliced interface from a downed scout. Static, then a clean stream. Transport Sigma, confirm route. Integrity, estimated arrival 1634. Terran Solar. We waited. They rolled in like they always did. Perfect formation, arrogant as ever. The 3 haulers were like giant metallic beetles crawling on gra lifts just inches off the ground. Smooth, seamless armor, unbreakable by anything conventional. Good thing we weren't conventional. I gave a hand signal. Thorn fired first. The drone above us let out a single scream. More Frequency then sound, and spiraled down. In flames, the second one veered off. Course trying to compensate, that's when DOS lit the sky, a home brewed. Magnetic pulse bomb built from scrap in raw hate, it detonated with a thundering whump, collapsing the air like God's sucker. Punched the sky, the remaining drone dropped like a stone, the haulers panicked, they weren't used to chaos. Nico sprinted out from cover and slid beneath the nearest hauler, planting two magnetic charges to its underbelly. He was out before it registered movement. 5 seconds later, that beast flipped like a kicked turtle, fire screams, pieces of alien tech raining like black snow. Other two haulers tried to retreat, but Thorn had already picked off their escort pilots. The sky was ours for once. I charged with Grant at my side. Plasma bolt seared past, scorching the ground. One caught Grant in the thigh. He screamed but kept moving. That kid had the heart of a storm. I lobbed an incendiary inside the hauler's side vent. It exploded from the inside. Purple alien blood and smoke billowing out like hellfire. That left the last hauler. It tried to lift, get airborne. Big mistake. Mira activated the hijacked uplink. The signal froze at midair. She reprogrammed its grav system on the fly and slammed it straight down into a building, and just like that the gods bled. After the smoke cleared, we dragged the pilot out, gray-skinned, tall, thin mouth like a vertical wound. It didn't beg, it didn't scream. They don't do emotion like we do, but it looked scared. That was new. I knelt beside it, dirt and blood on my face, staring into its silver black eyes. You're going to take a message back to your kind, I said. It made a sound, something between a hiss and static. I leaned in closer. You think Earth is yours, you think we're animals, but you made one fatal mistake. It blinked slowly. You didn't kill all of us. Then I slit its throat. Back at the bunker, we gathered around the old war table. The strike had been clean, no casualties except for Grant's leg. Mira was already patching him up. He winced but didn't complain. Tough bastard, but something bothered me. They'd been too slow, too predictable. They weren't adapting anymore. Nico leaned over the table, scanning the recovered data module we pulled from the wreckage. This is big, he said. They weren't just transporting materials. This was genetic. Payload human. What kind of payload? I asked. Beam mapping, neural replication. Looks like they were building models of human minds, trying to mimic emotional responses. Why? Mira looked up, face pale. They're afraid. Silence. They don't know how to beat us. She continued. So they're trying to become us. Learn how we think, how we rebel, how we endure. Thorn finally spoke. They won't understand, not in time. DOS lit a cigarette, eyes fixed on the monitor. Smoke curled around his jaw like fog on a mountain. I nodded slowly. This wasn't just about survival anymore. This was war. That night I stood outside the bunker, staring up at the stars. Somewhere up there in the cold darkness was a fleet that thought Earth had been pacified, that our species had been broken, but they were wrong. We weren't just fighting back, we were becoming something new, sharper, harder, more dangerous than ever. They thought submission was our end, but in trying to break us, they'd only forged a weapon. The jump to Mars wasn't supposed to happen, not for years. Not until we'd built proper launch platforms, oxygen stabilization, reinforced hulls for suborbital escape. But the resistance didn't have years anymore. The Greys were adapting, too slow to stop us but fast enough to make our little victories matter less with every passing week. They were closing in, so we went up the orbital station over Mars, designated Edon Node Theta 12, was a command center for communications. Massive, half a kilometer long, one of hundreds in the solar net that routed alien surveillance and broadcast pulses across every Terran zone. The Resistance had been trying to crack it for ages. But we had an edge now. Mira had decoded part of the neural replication matrix using it. She'd reverse engineered a short-lived biometric signature that mimicked the Greys' own command hierarchy. It wouldn't hold for more than 19 minutes, but 19 minutes was long enough to sneak onto the node and do what humans do best: raise hell. The launch platform was buried under what used to be a hydroelectric dam in British Columbia, reinforced during the Cold War, forgotten during the collapse, rediscovered by us. We had one ship pieced together from a downed, gray-skinned courier and a dead Russian orbiter. It groaned when it flew like metal, screaming against physics, but it flew. Thorn, Nico, Mira, and Grant were with me. Das stayed behind to run backup from ground control. If the plan went sideways, he'd flood the entire station with a Class 7 solar burst from an old satellite array. It would kill us and them. We all agreed, better a clean death than capture. The jump was violent. The stolen grav shuddered. The hull shook like it wanted to come apart, and for a second we all thought it had. Then, silence. We were in orbit. The node loomed ahead, red and black against the distant sun, like a fortress built from bone and molten steel. Scan complete, Mira said, breath tight, docking arm 12 open. We've got 16 minutes, no turning back. Now, inside the air was thinner, colder. It smelled like antiseptic and ozone. Artificial gravity pulled at our boots. No alarms yet. The biometric patch was holding for now. The station was quiet. No visible guards, but sensors tracked us constantly. The Greys didn't use soldiers like we did. They used drones. Biomechanical horrors that bled if you cracked them open. We moved fast. Thorn took point. Nico carried the uplink virus. Mira had the only interface tool that could even begin to sync with alien tech. We reached the core chamber in under 8 minutes. The comms relay was massive, a glowing pillar of shifting glyphs and pulsing veins of light. It wasn't just machinery. It was alive, organic metal, wrapped in nerve tissue, constantly adapting, mutating. Nico knelt beside it, fingers dancing over a stolen data pad. We've got maybe 4 minutes before the signature fails, he said. After that doesn't matter, I said. Get it done. Mira plugged in the interface. Glyphs flickered. The lights pulsed erratically. The station felt it. Knew something wasn't right. You sure the signal will get through? Thorn asked. No, she said, honest and cold. But if it does, every planet under their boot will hear it. That was the point. We weren't just trying to win. We were trying to wake up the galaxy, because we'd learned something the Greys didn't want anyone else to know. They weren't gods. They weren't even brave. They were parasites, systemic ruling through fear and pattern recognition. Strip enough worlds, break enough species, erase enough history, and no one remembers how to fight. But humans remembered. We never forget war. Nico hit the final sequence, the relay Course surged, casting long shadows. Across the room, the glyphs turned red. Violent, reactive, and then voices. Thousands of them, screaming, chanting. Begging, Mira staggered back. These aren't ours, these are other species. It hit me like ice. The station wasn't just for broadcasting, it was listening to the cries of every enslaved race they'd ever conquered, but now it hurt us. I stepped forward and keyed the mic. It wasn't human tech, it didn't have a frequency, it ran on neural resonance. So I thought the words in it pulled them out. I kept them simple. This is Earth. You thought we'd submit. You thought we'd die quietly. You were wrong. We are Terran. We are coming. Station trembled. Something screamed. Through the vents, alarms blared, deep pulsing sounds like the heartbeat of a dying god. Biometric patch failed. Time's up. Mira shouted. They know. Thorn dropped a drone with a charged round. Metal and bone splattered the wall. The doors slammed shut. We were trapped. Nico jammed the locks. 4 minutes. Till override maybe. I looked at Grant. He looked back, sweating, limping on his still healing leg. I'll hold them, he said, no hesitation. Like hell, I snapped. Someone's got to, he said. You know it. He pulled a satchel charge from his vest. Make it mean something. Thorn stared at him, jaw clenched, then nodded once and handed him his sidearm. You see one of them make it bleed first. We ran. Grant stayed. Last thing I heard before the doors closed was the echo of plasma fire, and then seconds later the boom. We barely made it to the ship. Mira was crying silently, blood on her face. Thorn was shot in the shoulder. Nico had a fractured wrist. I piloted us out. Manual only, fingers bleeding from the grip. We didn't speak. There was nothing to say. Grant was gone, but the message was sent. It didn't take long to spread. In less than 6 days, nodes across Jupiter's moons reported signal anomalies, other species intercepting the Terran broadcast and responding, not in words, in action. On Titan, a worker caste known as the Velcan detonated a fuel refinery and killed 6 Greys. On Antilatus, a primitive race of insectoids sabotaged their own mining shackles and flooded the caverns. On Proxima B, an entire slave colony vanished from their work zones. The galaxy was waking up and the Greys were panicking. Their network was based on silence, submission, predictability. But now Earth had introduced chaos, and chaos is viral. Back at the bunker, we buried Grant beneath the old pine tree where we first formed Cell 47. No ceremony, just dirt and memory. Thorn didn't speak for 2 days. Mira got drunk and broke a terminal. Nico locked himself in the lab and didn't eat for 36 hours. I just sat and watched the stars, waiting for the retribution we all knew was coming. And when it came, it wasn't a strike, it was something worse. A message arrived through our hacked comm grid, not broadcast direct. Personal. You were warned. Your defiance has cost you everything. Submit now or humanity will be purged. There was no signature, no name, just the voice. But it sounded different this time. Not calm, not superior, afraid. We recorded the message, played it back 100 times, analyzed every frequency, and we heard something beneath the words. Static, distortion, fear. They weren't invincible anymore. Mira stared at the screen, her voice cold. They don't know how to stop us. I nodded. We're not a species anymore, I said. We're a weapon. It started with a signal, not one of Ours not from Earth, the transmission. Hit our comm array like a whisper. Wrapped in thunder, no source, no known. Language just pulses, long, short. Rhythmic, Thorne thought it was. Interference, Mara disagreed. She ran it through a series of compression filters, then paused. Her face changed. It's not random, she said. It's a language. She pulled up the waveform and overlaid it on the base of our broadcast from Mars. The pattern was unmistakable. It was a reply, the first. We didn't sleep. That night, every resistance cell that had comorked the signal from their end. Fragmented pieces came in, bits of syntax, sound clusters. Some of it was pain, cries, screams, desperation. Recorded and reshaped into code, but beneath it there was structure, a name. Emerged the Cathari. We didn't know what they looked like, but we knew where they were, a moon orbiting Zeta Reticula. 3. That name meant nothing to the Greys. They called it Extraction Zone 78, just another processing moon, just another prison. Not anymore. A week later, a ship dropped into orbit. Above the Rockies, it wasn't gray. It didn't move like anything they built. The design was asymmetrical, grown, almost organic, like coral made of obsidian. No weapons, no comms burst. Just one message. We heard Earth, we remember defiance, we bring what the enemy fears. They sent a courier inside. It wasn't Cathari, at least it didn't say it was. Its body shimmered like wet mercury wrapped around a humanoid core. Its voice was broken, filtered through layers of mimicry, but the message was clear. They had fought the Greys once, long ago, and lost, but fragments of them survived, scattered across forgotten systems. For centuries they'd been silent, but Earth broadcast grants. Sacrifice woke them, and now they offered us something unthinkable. Weapon, they called it the spine. At first glance it looked like a spear. Black metal wrapped in bow wiring, humming with energy so dense it made Mira's hair stand on end. But it wasn't just a weapon, it was technology encoded in genetics, alive. It could bond with human DNA, merge with the nervous system, become part of us. But there was a cost. The mind that wields the spine must be willing to break. The envoy said it doesn't obey, it amplifies what's already there. In the wrong hands, it could twist a man into something worse than alien, into something inhuman. We had one chance to use it, and we knew where to strike. The Greys had launched a purge in retaliation for the Mars transmission. Entire Terran settlements gone dark. Toronto, Manila, parts of South Africa. Nothing left but scorched cities and air thick with dust. They weren't just killing rebels, they were punishing the idea of rebellion. So we hit back, but not on Earth. On Kix 9, a mining world on the fringe of the Grey supply chain, lightly defended, filled with labor colonies. Humans, Cathari, other species we hadn't even named yet. Our mission: liberate. It broadcast another message: show the galaxy that Terran didn't just talk about rising, we dragged others up with us. We had 2 stolen Grey skimmers, 1 functioning atmospheric cutter, a few heavy weapons, and the spine. Thorne volunteered to carry it. He didn't say why, he never said much, but I knew he'd been dying slowly since Grant. He needed something to hold on to, something to burn for. Mira tried to talk him out of it. Said it might kill him, or worse. He just looked at her with those scorched eyes and said, then it'll be quiet for once. We hit Kix 9 under heavy cloud cover. Gravity heavier than Earth, air tasted like rust and ammonia. The planet was black rock and burning factories, an open wound of slavery and industry. The Cathari weren't the only ones here. We saw dozens of species, skin like stone, eyes like glass, bones grown outside. Their bodies all broken, all working. Under watch of gray centuries, we landed. Outside Sector 3, Thorn carried the spine in a reinforced case. It pulsed, reacting to his touch even before he opened it. We had 12 minutes. The plan was chaos, always is. Nico hacked their surveillance towers and looped the feeds. Mira used a gas compound to disable the perimeter guards. Non-lethal, but enough to knock them out. I led the charge. We breached the fence and dropped 3 centuries before alarms triggered. The laborers didn't run, they just watched, hollow like they'd forgotten what freedom was. Then Thorn stepped forward. He opened the case. The spine screamed, not in sound and thought. It pierced the air like pressure collapsing your brain. Then it moved, coiled up his arm, pierced into his flesh, fused with his spine, his skull. His eyes rolled back, then glowed. Not white, not red, something older, deeper. For a second, I thought we'd lost him. Then he stood and started killing. Spine didn't give him strength, it gave him clarity. He moved like he knew the enemy before they even appeared. Plasma bolts missed him like they were scared to hit. His gun fired before targets even peeked from cover, and when they tried to swarm him, he used the spine itself. It extended, a tendril of metal and nerve slicing through 3 grays. In a single whip, no blood, no scream. Just gone. The laborers watched, silent, unmoving. Then one stepped forward. Cathari, tall, blue-skinned, scars across its arms. It picked up a fallen gray weapon and aimed it, not at us but with us, then another and another, until the field wasn't silent anymore. It was a riot. We took the comm station by force. Blood on metal, screams in 5 languages. The Cathari broadcast their own message first. We let them. It wasn't about us anymore. Then I stepped up, my face bruised, my hands shaking. Voice: you didn't break us, you revealed us. This is not the rise of Terran power. This is the spread of it. It was received in 66 systems. Within hours, uprisings broke out across 6 Greycrold zones. A supply station in Alpha Draconis fell. A genetics lab in Vega was burned to the ground by its own test subjects. Even some Greys began defecting, those too young to understand the lies, too smart to ignore the fear. We were a virus in their order, and now it was spreading. Too fast to contain, but they hit back hard. Earth's moon was bombed, not destroyed, just scarred. A message, a promise, and they deployed something new, not soldiers, not drones, something worse, something called the Silence. Ships that didn't make noise, weapons that didn't fire, just erased. We lost Cell 19 in one night. No footage, no comms, just a hole where a base used to be. And for the first time since Mars, I felt the weight again, like we were running uphill in a storm, like every wind was pulling the next loss closer. Thorn began to change, not visibly, not yet, but the spine was digging deeper. His movements became sharper, more mechanical. His eyes didn't blink when people talked. He stopped eating much. He could kill Grace with ease now, but when Mira asked him a question once, he just stared at her like it took too long to remember how to be human. She came to me one night, eyes red. He's not going To last, I knew, but we needed him for. Now, the galaxy had changed. We weren't begging for help anymore. We were the rallying cry, humans broken savage. Furious humans, we weren't just rebelling, we were redefining what power looked like. And the Greys were scrambling to rewrite the rules, but it was too late. The book was already burning. It started with the stars dimming, not the metaphorical kind, real star systems with thriving colonies. Human Cathari, others went dark. No comms, no heat signatures, no ships. At first we thought it was sabotage, a tactical purge, maybe orbital bombardments again. Then we intercepted a fragment of a gray transmission on the edge of the Virexian belt. Silence. Protocol now active. Proceed to system level nullification. Not destruction, eraser. We pieced it together from what little data we could extract before the signal burned itself out. The silence wasn't a fleet, it was a weapon. A machine hidden in the outer systems, possibly older than the Greys themselves. Designed not to kill bodies, but to erase all trace of civilization. It didn't burn cities, it deleted history, cultural memory, infrastructure, communication, DNA, archives, languages, names, maps, the past gone. A species could still survive, but it would be like waking up in the dark with no name, no story, no proof it had ever existed. The ultimate defeat, because if no one remembers your struggle, did you even fight? Earth was next. The signal trajectory was clear. The silence was moving inward, one system at a time, headed straight for the Terran cradle. The resistance was in panic. Some factions wanted to scatter, flee to deep space and preserve what we could. Others, like Mira, wanted to strike the silence head-on, even if it meant total suicide. But I wanted something different. I wanted to end this war, not with peace, not with surrender, with legacy. If they meant to erase us, we'd make damn sure the last thing they heard before the lights went out was our name burned into the sky. The hidden fleet wasn't much to look at. Half the ships were cobbled together from mining rigs and transport haulers. One was literally a reprogrammed alien prison cruiser. The flagship, the Revenant, was an old orbital refinery with a rail cannon strapped to its spine, but they flew. And we had the spine. Thorn hadn't spoken in 2 days. His skin had grayed at the edges, veins faintly glowing like molten circuits. His eyes never blinked anymore. He barely slept. Mira wanted to sedate him, said he was losing humanity by the hour. He already gave it up, I told her, but for what? She whispered. For revenge. No, I said, for proof. We launched 2 days before the silence was expected to reach the moon. Mira, Nico, and I flew on the Revenant. Das ran point from the Terran surface, coordinating countermeasures in case the silence breached orbit. He had a clean shot satellite laser loaded with antimatter cores, primitive but desperate. Thorn flew alone. He piloted a strike pod laced with Cathari biotech. It interfaced directly with the spine. Now it didn't need controls anymore. It was him. We reached the silence in high orbit above Aerodani Prime. It didn't look like a ship. It looked like a star that had been folded into itself. No weapons, no hulls, just pulsing layers of geometry, impossible shapes that flickered in and out of visible space. It wasn't built to fight. It was built to overwrite reality. The attack began. With words, we broadcast every language Earth had ever spoken. millions of phrases stitched together in a roar of sound, not for communication, for resistance. We told stories, recorded screams, laughter, birth, last stands, words from children, war cries from soldiers, prayers from old women. We screamed humanity into the void. Silence paused. We got 6 minutes before it rebooted, enough time for Thorn to breach. His pod sliced through the outer layer like a needle through flesh. We watched through external cams until they blacked out. The feed was gone. But then the silence screamed, not in sound, in signal. Every system shuddered, ships shook, lights died, screens went white. Then a new image emerged, not from our feed but from the silence itself. Thorn, his body was broken, barely recognizable, bone exposed, half machine, but his eyes were burning with something even the spine couldn't contain. Behind him, the core of the silence pulsed, and he spoke. You wanted silence, here's what it sounds like when Terran dies screaming. Then he detonated, we lost the signal. Then the silence cracked. A visible fracture split the construct. Down the middle, light poured out like a supernova. The geometry bled itself apart, shape folding inside shape until it imploded silently into nothing. Gone. The fleet cheered. Mirror collapsed against the wall, sobbing. Nico just stared at the screen, jaw clenched, whispering Thorn's name. I didn't speak because it wasn't over. The Greys retaliated instantly, not from orbit, from within. They'd embedded sleeper AI in Earth's deep net, buried code that activated once the silence failed. Civilian defense systems turned on themselves. Atmospheric stabilizers began to vent. Gravity regulators on Mars flickered. Food synthesis stopped. The war wasn't ending, it was evolving. They were losing control, so they chose chaos. Das called in from Earth. Systems burning, he said. I can't stop the subroutines. Can you reroute them? I asked. No, but I can wipe the grid. That'll kill the terraformers. Yeah, he said, but Earth will live. Might go dark for 50 years, but we'll have those years. He didn't ask for permission. He just did it. When the global grid shut down, Earth went quiet. No signals, no lights, but it didn't mean defeat. It meant reset. No AI, no satellites, no control systems, just fire, just human hands, just resistance. 3 days later, the stars were bright. Again, no silence, no gray fleet. The war wasn't won, but it had changed. We weren't a conquered species anymore. We were the beginning of something else. We built a monument for Thor, not on Earth. In orbit, a rotating beacon that emits the last scream of the silence in every direction on repeat, a message in the dark, and next to it a line of code. We are Terran. We die loud. The sky was quiet for the first time in months. No black ships hovering. No drones skimming tree lines. No crackling emergency broadcast, just the silence of a species catching its breath. But silence doesn't mean peace. Sometimes it means something worse, because when the noise dies down, that's when the voices in your head get louder. We called it the time right after the silence broke, after the orbital resets, after the resistance finally held more than just dirt and dreams. But no one really knew what to do with freedom. Not real freedom, not the kind you earn by burying every friend you ever fought beside. The resistance didn't collapse, but it fractured. Some cells wanted to put deeper into gray territory, burn every last system, wipe them out to the atom. Others wanted to fall back, regroup, build something worth saving. Me, I didn't want either, I just wanted to know why they came for us in the first place. Why Earth, why us, why now? And what the hell was really behind the silence? It started with Mira. She found something in the Cathari archives, fragments they had taken from a gray relay long ago, data the Greys never meant anyone to see, encrypted, buried, sealed behind alien neural logic, but we had a key now, Thorn, or more accurately, what Thorn became before he died. The spine didn't just amplify his body, it recorded him, it stored his mind, a neural echo preserved in the weapon's biomemory. That was the Cathari's secret. The spine wasn't a tool, it was a library, a vault of rage, sacrifice, and knowledge too dangerous to die, and inside it was the truth. We activated it on the Revenant. Deep orbit, no ground access, no comm lines. Open, just me, Mira, Nico, and the spine. Wired into a containment pod, glowing like a heartbeat dipped in acid. Mira ran the interface. Nico stood ready to cut the feed if things went sideways. I sat in the chair. You're the only one it recognizes, she said quietly. You led him, you were his anchor. I nodded. I still feel him sometimes, I whispered, when I close my eyes. Then go find him. The link hit me like drowning. 1 second I was strapped into cold metal. The next I was standing on broken soil, beneath a black sky filled with screaming stars. Not a dream, not a memory, a mental archive. And Thorn was there, not as he looked before he died, but as he was when he first joined us. Rough, silent, burned, but human. He didn't speak. He just pointed toward the horizon where a tower of flickering light spun through the dark. I followed. The archive was built like a dream, stitched together with war stories. Burned cities floated above oceans of fire. The screams of our past blended into a soundtrack of sirens and static. It wasn't random, it was deliberate. Constructed by the Greys. This wasn't Thorn's mind, it was a prison built inside the spine, a trap. I reached the tower and touched it. Pain ripped through my skull. Flashes, memories not my own. Gray biology, gray origin, gray fear. I saw them as they truly were, not gods, not masters, not conquerors. Survivors, a species that once thrived, until something else found them. Something worse, something ancient. They called it the Hollow, a formless intelligence that devoured meaning. Culture, thought. It didn't conquer planets, it stripped them of identity. It erased purpose, it didn't need soldiers, it used silence. It found the Greys first, crushed their history, wiped their art, burned their individuality, left behind only a shell. A race that mimicked order because they had none left. The Greys didn't invent the silence, they escaped it and then used it to stay ahead of it. If they could erase other species first, maybe the Hollow would ignore them. That's why they came for Earth, not because we were dangerous, but because we were loud. Too creative, too chaotic, too alive. We attracted the Hollow like blood attracts sharks, so the Greys acted. They came to kill our culture before it called something worse. The truth floored me. We weren't in a war of rebellion. We were in a race for cultural survival. And the Greys were just scared runners, trying to trip us before the finish line. I tore myself from the archive, gasping. Mira was there, clutching my shoulders. Nico had the kill switch half pressed. I saw it, I choked out, all of it. They're not gods, Mira said, eyes wide. They're infected. No, I said. They're just next. We had a choice. Now, exterminate them or save them. But before we could decide, something else moved. On the third day after the archive, long-range comms lit up. Not gray, not resistance, something new. Voice filled every open channel, clear and slow, speaking in dozens of languages at once. We have heard your noise. You were warned. You were told. Now you will listen. Then all systems crashed. Ships froze in orbit. Satellites died. Firewalls melted. Only one signal remained. Frequency of forgetting. Low, constant. Infectious. The hollow had arrived. Panic hit the resistance like a wave. AI cores corrupted. History servers degraded. Entire libraries turned to gibberish. But Earth held because we had already reset. We had already gone dark. The sabotage from the Greys, the purge of systems, had unintentionally made Earth immune to the hollow signal. Where digital archives failed, humans remembered stories. Where AI collapsed, oral tradition lived. We weren't the most advanced. We were the most primitive, and that saved us, but it wouldn't save the others. The Cathari, the Velsin, the insectoid colonies on Vega, all more advanced, all wired into fragile memory systems, all dying. Unless we did the unthinkable, unless we shared the virus. We called it Project Ember, a reverse signal designed to reignite cultural memory through analog resonance. Books, songs, handwritten scrolls, speeches, street art, sound bites, tribal dances, vinyl recordings of bar fights in New York City. Anything that screamed we existed. We couldn't fight the hollow with guns, but we could fight it with story. We split the fleet. Nico led the broadcast teams. He wired Ember into ancient probes modified to scatter across known systems. Mira stayed on Earth, safeguarding the last physical libraries. I went deep into gray territory to offer them the truth, to show them what the hollow really was. They didn't trust me. Why would they? I'd killed them, hunted them, burned their convoys, but I brought the spine. I brought thorns, memory, and I played them the archive. I showed them the hollow. I showed them what we saw, and one of them, a gray elder named Sath, looked at me with those soulless eyes and said, "You broke everything, and in doing so you may have saved us all." They joined us not out of debt, out of fear. Together we turned the Ember signal into a beacon. We placed it on the moon, where the silence once aimed its strike. Constant analog pulse beaming humanity's worst and brightest moments into space. Not because we wanted attention, but because we wanted to be remembered. Even if we lost, I still dream of Thorn. Sometimes not as he was, but as he became. A mind burned clean by rage, but not without soul. I think he knew what was coming. I think he chose the spine, not for vengeance, but for preservation. Because deep down he knew something we all forget. Legacy isn't written in history books. It's written in blood, in pain, in fire, in stories whispered by survivors. It began with Mira. She forgot her sister's name. At first we thought it was stress. She'd barely slept, working night and day on Ember's signal calibrations. Her hands trembled constantly. Her voice frayed like it had barbed wire running through it. But then she forgot other things: where she was born, the name of her father, the layout of her childhood home. One morning she stared into a mirror for 20 minutes before whispering, "I don't know who I'm looking at." We scanned her brain. No trauma, no decay, just absence, memories cleanly cut out like surgical removals, no scars, no damage, just empty space where identity used to live. She wasn't the only one. Across resistance networks, commanders began speaking in fragmented sentences. Fighters forgot why they were holding weapons on Titan. An entire crew of 300 stopped responding, not because they were dead, but because they no longer recognized their own language. The Hollow had evolved. It wasn't just corrupting machines now, it was crawling inside us, rewriting neurons, erasing context. You still remembered words, but not what they meant to you. You could say mother, but it felt like something you'd read, not something you'd lived. And when the meaning of a thing is gone, you're not far behind. We called it the slip, the slow fade of self spreading like mold inside the human mind. We didn't know how it transmitted through dream signals, touch, but it was moving fast and no one was immune, not even me. It started one morning with a photo, an old one, black and white, a younger me and a boy with freckles I couldn't name. I stared at it for almost an hour, my own face younger but hollow. The boy beside me, I didn't know him. I had a brother once, didn't I? Mira saw me that day just standing there. She didn't speak. She just took the photo, burned it, and whispered, "Hold on to what you feel, not what you remember." That's when I realized feelings lasted longer than facts. The Hollow took information, but emotion that left echoes, pain, rage, fear, love. You could forget the name of the person you lost, but the ache that stayed. We needed a counter-strike, something faster than Ember, something that could go deep, not just to the brain, but to the soul of memory. The Cathari had a word for it, madras. Ritual, a shared neural space formed by emotional tethering, basically one mind dives into another to rebuild what's been lost. Dangerous, unstable, but our only chance. We decided to test it on Mira. Her slip was getting worse. She forgot Thorn's name yesterday, the man she cried over, the man she once begged me to save. She was fading fast. I volunteered. The Madras interface was built from Cathari Dreamweave tech, organic nodes, webbed with neural fibers linked between two subjects. Think of it like co-dreaming, except with no control, no guarantees. If I slipped inside and failed to bring her memories back, I wouldn't come out either. We sat in the medbay aboard the Revenant, orbiting far from any hollow signal. Safety buffer, Nico protested. Said I'd risk the command structure. I told him I wasn't the commander anymore. I was just the last man left who remembered what mattered. The dive in felt like drowning in syrup, heavy, thick, endless, then suddenly light. I stood in a version of Earth that never existed, skies the color of wine, buildings twisted like vines, cars hovering upside down, and Mira standing barefoot in a dress, humming a tune that didn't exist in any human culture. When she saw me, she smiled. "Are you one of the architects?" she asked. "No." I said, "I'm your friend." She tilted her head. "I don't think I have those." The landscape bent as we walked. Trees turned into books, rivers into data, streams, the world constantly recontextualizing itself, as if it didn't know what it was supposed to be. That's how I knew I was deep inside the Hollow's corruption, not pure memory, but interpreted memory, dislocated, disjointed. I had to find the anchor, the emotional spike strong enough to pull her back. I Tried talking about Thorn, she blinked. The fireman, he was sad. Do you remember? How he died, she shrugged. Everyone dies. And here, I tried another route. Do you remember your sister? Nothing. Then I took a risk. I reached out, grabbed her hand, and said the name she hadn't said. In weeks, Kira, she flinched. The sky fractured, a thunderclap of truth. Suddenly the dream mirror collapsed. I followed her down and we fell. The world shattered into scenes, her memories disconnected and playing at random. Kira, 12 years old, laughing in the snow. Mira kneeling beside a dying man in Sudan, holding his hand as he bled out. Her first kiss, her mother's funeral, her acceptance into the resistance, every moment flickering like static, but I held them, I narrated them, spoke them aloud, gave them meaning. You were there, you felt that. This is you, Mira. Each time I said it, the moment stabilized, the sky brightened, and she began to cry. When we came out of the dive 2 hours later, she remembered everything. Her voice shook, her hands wouldn't stop trembling, but she looked at me and said, the one name that mattered, Thorn. Madras worked, and not just once. We began training others, deep divers, emotional anchors, memory shepherds. We sent them across resistance sectors, helping those affected by the slip. It was slow, painful, and dangerous. Some didn't come back, others came back. Wrong changed, but we were winning again. And the Hollow, it didn't like that. 3 days after Madras went public, a resistance outpost on Kepler 22b received a different kind of signal. Human voice crying, begging, asking for help. It was me. My voice, my memories, broadcast across 6 systems, except I'd never sent it. It was fake, a lure. The Hollow was learning, mimicking our voices now, building false identities to infiltrate resistance minds. We realized then the battlefield had shifted again. It wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about narrative dominance. Whoever told the better story won. Because if they could tell a lie louder than your truth, people would believe it, even inside their own heads, even if it meant turning on each other. We doubled down on Madras, but we added something new, legacy tokens, tiny analog artifacts encoded with emotion. A father's knife, a daughter's drawing, a soldier's final letter. We paired each resistance fighter with one and trained them to tie it to memory, a tactile reminder of who they were. If the Hollow came knocking, that artifact would be the anchor. It was primitive, it was stupid, but it worked because humans, we're stupid like that. We'll remember a smell, a sound, a stupid joke at 2 a.m. longer than we'll remember dates or coordinates. And when everything else gets rewritten, that's the stuff that stays. I carry one too now, not a weapon, not a plan, just a faded patch from Thorn's jacket, the one he dropped the night before Mars. It smells like smoke and sweat and rain. It reminds me I was there, that it mattered, that he mattered, and that we still have something worth fighting for. It started subtle. History terminals misfiring. Timelines rearranging, textbooks rewritten, first just dates, then people. In a resistance archive on Europa, the name Maravellas disappeared from every personnel file. In orbit above Saturn, a memorial to Cell 47 showed 6 names instead of 7. Mine wasn't one of them. Whole battles we'd fought were gone. No logs, no footage, no scars on the land, just stories. Loose ones fading. Some began to believe those stories never happened. Some began To believe we never happened. That's when I knew the hollow was rewriting the past, not metaphorically, literally, and if it reached critical mass, our entire rebellion, our entire species would vanish from memory, from history, from reality, like we'd never screamed, never bled, never burned for something better. We still had Madras. But this was bigger than memory rescue. This wasn't personal loss, this was cultural deletion. Madras could pull one soul back from the dark, but it couldn't pull back a species. We needed something different, something massive, something human. We called it the recall. The idea was insane. Nico said so. Mira called it suicidal. They weren't wrong, but it was the only move left. Broadcast one collective memory across every human mind at once, every planet, every outpost, every cell, one story. One truth tied to one emotion, defiance. Not data, not facts, a feeling. If the hollow was rewriting information, then we'd carve a deeper layer beyond logic, into gut memory, primitive, animal, raw. The recall would not be uploaded to systems. It would be burned into the species through pain, through loss, through something no weapon could erase. We knew we couldn't do it from Earth. It had already been attacked too many times. It was quiet now, but monitored. So we chose Artemis Drift, a dead station floating between Neptune and Pluto, cold, broken, forgotten, perfect. That's where we built the recall core. And that's where the hollow came for us. It didn't arrive with ships this time. It came as storms in the sky, electromagnetic tremors, light bending in impossible ways. It whispered into minds, some of our own turned good people, fighters. They started speaking in voices that weren't theirs. This didn't happen. You don't exist. There is no war. There never was. We had to sedate some, lock others down. One man jumped out the airlock screaming, "I was never born." The hollow didn't have to kill us. It just had to convince us that we weren't real. We powered up the recall core 2 hours before system corruption would hit the drift. The design was simple. I'd dive into the Madras network alone and pull a composite story from every soldier, every survivor, every voice that had fought and screamed and clawed through the war. Then, using the Cathari resonance arrays, we'd fuse it into a shared psychic echo. Not a memory, a myth, not facts. Meaning, if it worked, we'd anchor the story of humanity forever. If it failed, we'd be a whisper swallowed by silence. I strapped in. Mira stood beside me. Her eyes were tired but clear, solid. She handed me a token. Thorn's old jacket patch, burned, frayed, still smelling like rain and ash. I stitched it back together, she said. I nodded. She leaned close. Don't bring back the facts, Ren. Bring back the feeling. The dive wasn't like before. There was no shape, no sky, no voices. Just a black ocean of nothing. The hollow waited there, not in form, but in intent. It didn't speak, it didn't threaten, it just pressed down like the weight of forgetting crushing my lungs. But I pushed deeper, and then I found it. Memory, old faint mine. A boy on a rooftop in what used to be New York, watching the stars fall, not from awe, but because that was the night the Greys arrived. He was crying, not because he was afraid, but because he knew that the world he loved was about to end. That boy was me. And that feeling, that loss, that rage was the key. I reached for another thread. Mira, her sister, snow, laughter, blood on her hands, the day she took her first life to save someone else. Grant, his legs shaking as he volunteered to hold the line. "I'll hold them," he said, "you know it." Thorn, silent, eyes burning, becoming more machine than man, but still holding on to that tiny spark of us, DOS, sacrificing power to Earth, wiping the systems clean to buy us a future. Nico, sleepless, talking to machines like they were people, coding hope into broken circuits, every name, every moment, every scream. I gathered them like wood for a fire, and then I lit the match. Outside the drift, the hollow struck. Mira watched as panels cracked, power surged. The Cathari resonance arrays began to fail. The station groaned, fractured, but the recall core held. And then it pulsed across every Terran outpost, every resistance fleet, every brain tuned to even the faintest signal. It hit, not with a word but with a feeling, a truth, the cry of a child as the sky turned red, the scream of a soldier holding a burning line, the last breath of a father telling his daughter she would survive, the sound of defiance, unfiltered, unforgiving, unforgettable, a myth born in blood. And in that moment the hollow cracked. It didn't die, things like that don't die, but it recoiled because it couldn't overwrite, meaning burned into bone. It couldn't delete what was felt in every muscle, every scar, every tear shed, the dirt of a dying world. It fled, retreated beyond the system, not defeated but beaten back for now. When I woke, I was in the medbay, the patch still in my hand, mirror beside me, eyes red but smiling. "You did it," she said. I tried to speak. She shushed me. "Rest, you earned a chapter." That's what they called it now. Not victory, a chapter, because history wasn't safe anymore. It never had been. But now we understood that. Now we fought not just to survive, but to remember. They rebuilt Earth slowly, not with AI, not with drones, but with hands and ink and carvings in stone. We taught the Cathari how to sing again. We taught the Velson how to mourn. We taught ourselves how to tell stories without needing machines to validate them. We carried legacy in scars, in spoken word, in blood-stained patches sewn back together. I still hear the hollow sometimes faint out beyond Pluto, like a radio signal lost in the dark, but I'm not afraid because I know now it will always come back and will always be ready, not with guns, not with fire, but with the one thing it can never understand, a story told by survivors. We are Terran, we remember, we rise.